She is the Director of Human Resources for Tooele County. She comes from a career working in industry and being able to provide these human resources services there. She presents on these subjects in various conferences around. And so we are really excited to have Jamie come in on the second part of our FMLA series where she's going to tell us how workers' compensation and ADA dovetail into the FMLA. So without further ado, since there's been plenty of ado already, I'm going to throw the ball over to Jamie.
Okay.
Did you see that? Did that pop up? Okay.
Yep, it did.
Awesome. Just accept that and
it's okay.
It might be.
It actually disappeared from mine now.
It might be under a window.
Oh.
So if you just minimize that, Doug, if you want to.
It probably did pop somewhere else, huh?
That's the normal issue that we run into.
We're finding it.
No
oh, here it is.
Whatsoever.
We found it.
Perfect.
Here we are.
Okay, I've got your screen.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for having me back. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And hello to those of you who are going to watch this recorded later. I can backwards. This just says hello. I just want to give a shout out real quick because he wasn't awake when I left the house. My oldest son turned 20 today. I'm now down to two teenagers, so that's fun. We're short one teenager now. Happy birthday, Patrick. And welcome, everybody. Thank you again for coming. We're going to go into kind of a part 2 to FMLA, where we're going to bring in what do you do, for example, if FMLA time runs out? How do I know which to choose, FMLA, ADA, or workers' comp? Or what if someone doesn't qualify for FMLA? What do I do? Am I still required to do something? And if so, what am I required to do? Again, I always like to stress that this is important because we want to meet the needs of our employees while still getting, work done in our workplace and what our expectations are as an employer and making sure that those people who do those things for us are also well taken care of. We're going to start today by doing some basic definitions, FMLA, ADA, and workers' comp. Then we're going to go through which one applies and how do I know which one to use. Then we're going to get very specific into ADA because when I give you the definitions, you're going to say, but what does that mean? And we're going to dig down into exactly what reasonable accommodations mean and what it doesn't mean. Hopefully, we're going to get to some forms and websites for you very briefly so that you're aware of what's out there that you can utilize for some help, how to administer it in your entity, and then time for questions. And you can ask questions at any time as well. Just let Jason know and he'll post them out to me because I can't see that far away. Okay, so this fine young lady in class is very enthusiastic, ready to go. Definitions, favorite part of the day. For those of you who tuned in to our first webinar, you know that we took about 45 minutes talking about FMLA. So today you get one slide. For those of you who didn't get the opportunity to see the first webinar, I believe that's still available, and it's probably a good idea to review it if you're an entity that utilizes FMLA. So it is the Family Medical and Leave Act. It's overseen by the U.S. Department of Labor. Just very briefly, it's the one that grants employees up to 12 weeks per 12-month period to have unpaid job protective leave, and not just for themselves, but for the birth or adoption of a child, as well as taking care of somebody else. It's also the act that oversees 26 weeks of leave for active service members, and that covers not only overseeing a family member's care, but things like if they need time off to find child care and other things, both when the service member is on active leave and when they return from active leave. And retaliation rights are covered as well under FMLA. So that's your 45 minutes in one slide. Moving on to the ADA. ADA is an extremely comprehensive act. It is overseen and administered by the United States Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division. Straight away, before we even get to the website, I would not go to their websites to find out about ADA. I go straight to ada.org or .gov. It's a much better website and clarifies some things a lot better for you. It is very comprehensive. It talks about the civil rights and prohibiting discrimination for people with disabilities. So to be protected and covered by ADA, you must have a disability, and that is defined by the ADA as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Also, if you have a history of that impairment, or if you are perceived by others as having that impairment. So as you can see from this definition, it's very broad. You're thinking, what in the world does that mean? What does that cover? The ADA does not define by listing what that covers, but I'm going to show you in a minute how we figure those kind of things out. I want to talk a little bit more about how comprehensive this act is. We're probably in the human resource area very familiar with Title I. Those are your employment regulations. They cover hiring, leave, and the accommodations that we all, question what in the world does that mean and how do I make that happen. We're probably all also very familiar with, as businesses, granting general accessibility to buildings, bathrooms, having elevators, things like that. But the ADA covers so much more than that. I wanted to bring up a case just recently finished in Indiana, and this was very interesting to me. The ADA covers so much more than the things that we're familiar with. This was a case where the YMCA was sued by a woman whose child had applied to go to a daycare system in the summertime while they were out of school. And she signed the child up. The child came and she said, oh, by the way, my child has diabetes and needs a shot every day. And the YMCA said, wow, we don't give shots. We don't have anyone here that can give shots. So the long story short, after it was all said and done, she had to find the child another place to be, and she sued the YMCA. And the YMCA lost, and the court said under ADA, they were required to provide a nurse to let this child have a shot and be able to go to school at the YMCA during the summer and have, accessibility to this daycare program. So this is so much more than we even think about that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. I just wanted you guys to realize how broad this act is. So I'm going to list some of the things that it just recently have come up in court cases, because this is how we know what do they mean by a physical and mental impairment. They don't list them. They don't say this one is and this one isn't. They don't say this one is in this case and this one isn't. What happens is we go through all these case laws where it's ruled upon, and that's how we know what the ADA and the courts are backing and defining as physical and mental impairments. Some of these are going to be really obvious to us, so the ones that we think of when we think of a disability: blindness, loss of limbs, a speech impairment, and some aren't things that we probably would have ever thought as a disability that they're ruling in the favor of accommodations now. Drug addiction is one that surprises everybody. Cancer, probably not, but it's newer to us. And again, when we're talking about do I cover with the FMLA, what if FMLA doesn't cover things? Does ADA cover it? ADA has had court cases ruled around cancer, for example, and leave for that, so that's something we need to consider. Another one that kind of surprises people is anxiety and personality disorders, and those are things, again, that are either currently in court cases or are already have been in court cases. So this is how we figure out what the ADA means by physical or mental impairments. Major life activities. Again, the first one is probably very common that we all know about and think about. If someone has trouble walking, seeing, hearing, and speaking, I think we're very accommodable and we understand what that means, and we think of ways to help. Things we don't think of maybe so often are learning, thinking, working, and caring for oneself. Breathing isn't a new one. It may look strange on your list, but it's something we've dealt with for actually a long time and has been defined and worked out under the ADA. And that is, I think you guys, once I give you the example, you'll understand completely. If people have allergies, that's defined as a mental or physical impairment, and breathing is the major life activity that it impairs. We know that in small working areas or offices that are open that just have cubicles, if you've got somebody with allergies and you've got another person sitting near them that likes a lot of cologne or perfumey smells, that you can ask them, and it is perfectly accommodable to us as the employer to prevent or ask the person not to wear or spray things that bother somebody who has allergies. So that's where that one comes in, and that's how you would take a word like that and understand how to make it apply in the workplace. This is my favorite because we use this all the time when we talk about our job descriptions. And at the very last line of our essential job functions, we always like to add and other duties as assigned. So the ADA said, oh, that's a great one. We're going to add other activities of central life importance to most people's lives. So pretty much covers anything that you can think of. Again, we're going to come back and dig down into reasonable accommodations for ADA because I think that's most people's biggest questions these days. But first, let's talk about workers' comp for just a second. Workers' compensation is established by states, so each state's going to be a little different. I think I looked on our list. Everybody here is from our state, so this one's going to be pretty easy for us to talk to together. And that is a no-fault insurance system that helps pay for medical expenses and helps offset lost wages for employees with work-related injuries or illnesses. Okay, I'm going to stop 1 second. And I have a question on the board. Is PTSD covered under FMLA? I'm going to guess if it isn't already, it will be. Specifically, there are a lot of extra clauses for, we were talking about the military clauses for FMLA, and they're pretty vast and pretty specific. And so I'm going to say if it isn't now, it will be soon. So yes would be my answer. And probably ADA as well, by the way. I would definitely think it would be covered under the American with Disabilities Act as well. Okay, so back to workers' comp real quick. So what does that mean? Again, I think workers' compensation is pretty clear-cut. Most of us understand it. Workers are entitled to compensation benefits for work injuries or illnesses, even if you've only been on the job for a short time or do part-time work. So that covers every employee in your workplace. A couple of things it doesn't cover is intentional self-inflicted injuries. We know as we put in claims, and most of our claim managers are very aware and give us an opportunity to say, hey, is there something else I should know about this? And we get an opportunity to let them know we might want to look into this. And also, disability compensation may be denied for injuries from drug or alcohol abuse. Not medical benefits, that's definitely still covered, but the disability compensation can be denied for that reason. It can also be cut back. I don't know if most people know this. If you willfully fail to use safety devices or follow safety rules. So that's something that you definitely want to be very clear as you're training for safety and safety rules, that if they fail to follow them, their workers' compensation could be cut back from them. What it does cover is reasonable medical care coverage, temporary disability compensation after 3 days of missed work, partial compensation if say your work time is reduced, permanent disability compensation until, say, a Social Security disability would take over. And there are small benefits in case of death. I believe they're for covering funeral expenses. So how do I know which ones to use? Where do I go from here, and you know, why would we choose one and not another? So the first thing I talk about is FMLA. FMLA, and the reason that is its own presentation separate before we start applying some of these other accommodation and leave acts, is because it is so comprehensive and beneficial to the employee. So that's why most employees will ask, can this and can I be covered under FMLA? Remember, FMLA covers health benefits as you're on the leave. It covers your job protection when you come back. It covers quite an extensive amount of leave time for all of this to take place. It covers not just yourself, but you caring for somebody else, which the other acts do not cover. The other acts are solely for yourself. So there are a lot of benefits to FMLA, and that's why we usually go there first. So is the employer covered by FMLA? I'm going to really breeze through these because we did these last time when we talked about FMLA. That is, do they employ 50 more people? Are you a joint employer that employs 50 more people, or an entity that acts directly or indirectly in the interest of the employer? One side note real quick here, that very last line, I don't think we talked about it last time. What does that mean, the entity that acts directly or indirectly in the interest of the employer? That's huge right now. McDonald's franchisees are being sued right now in court because if they were an individual McDonald's franchisee, and say they employed 20 people and they only owned one restaurant, they were not covered by FMLA. They didn't have to grant FMLA to their team members. So if the team members from quite a few separate entities have grouped together and said, we do everything like McDonald's. We make the same hamburgers, we have the same signs, we follow the same HR practices and any other regards to this company, why can't we have FMLA? And the courts are ruling on that right now. This is huge, probably not for us as cities and government entities, but for the private industry, this is huge. If this court case is ruled in the favor of the employees, that's a game changer for any small business that owns one or more small franchises. Again, for us, yes, if you employ 50 or more people, then you check to see if the employee is covered. And again, if the answer is no, there's no FMLA, but a lot of people asked this last time when we were doing the FMLA presentation. Does that mean I'm done? Do I have to do anything? You need to consider if the person is also covered under ADA or workers' comp or any other local policy or rule. So is the employee covered by FMLA? Again, 12 months, 1,250 hours, there's 50 people within 75 miles, and they have time left on FMLA, then yes, you just check is the reason for leave covered or no. If it's no, there's no FMLA, but again, consider ADA or workers' comp. So is the reason for leave covered? The birth or placement of a child, employee's own serious health condition, to care for somebody with a serious health condition. And again, there are those extra things for active military. And we talked about these when we were together last time. Yes, if yes, it's yes. Make sure all paperwork is complete and in place, and make sure your tracking is in place and FMLA is covered, continue on with FMLA. Again, if the answer is no, then no FMLA, but you see the pattern here. You've got to consider what else is available for that employee. So this one's much easier than FMLA. Is the employer covered by ADA? Yes. 15 or more people, they're covered. Then we need to know if the employee is covered. And if the answer is no, then again, you can deny the accommodation. However, you need to consider workers' comp or any other local policy, including any that you may have in your own policy handbook. So is your employee covered by ADA? We talked about that. Is there a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of major life activities? So there's only two things that they need to qualify here for. And we were talking about the vast amount of things that are covered under ADA. So if the answer is yes, then you need to just check, is the person qualified to do that job with or without reasonable accommodation? And if the answer is no, you can deny the accommodation and consider, again, workers' comp or a local policy that you may have. So do you have a duty to provide that reasonable job accommodation? If the employee normally has the skills, education, and experience to fulfill the job function with or without the accommodation, then the answer is yes. Is the accommodation reasonable? And if the answer is no, then you do not have to provide a reasonable accommodation. are you seeing the pattern here? But there's always something else to still look for. Undue hardship. This is a fun one, and we're going to talk about this in very much detail in just a minute, so I'm going to breeze through this. The nature and cost of the accommodation, the financial resources of the entity, and the number of the employees all impact whether or not it's reasonable to accommodate. If it is reasonable, one more question to go. If it is a hardship, you can deny, but also at this point in time, you're going to have to document the reason why you're considering it a hardship and be able to back that up. And finally, this may be obvious, but it's actually a good thing that it's in here to protect us. As long as this accommodation does not risk or alter the safety or health of all the other employees, including that person, then we can accommodate the request. Okay, question, what is substantial impairment? Can you be more specific? What is substantial impairment for me? Have them clarify that a little bit, and then I'll come back to it.
Okay, yeah, all I got right now is just what is substantial impairment.
As in a medical substantial impairment? Are they asking medically speaking?
It says, in other words, what is substantial?
That's a good question. We're going to go to that right the best we can right now. So the point of ADA is to make the workplace accommodable and make the employee able to do the job. So hopefully this is going to help a little bit, and we can come back to that question. You can clarify more if this doesn't help. So an accommodation is a modification or adjustment to that job or the work that allows the individual with the disability to enjoy equal employment. So some examples, and again, this first one here, making facilities accessible is very common to us. We know we've got to have elevators. We know we've got to have ramps up on the curb. We know we have to have accessible bathrooms. So those are pretty reasonable, expected, and easy to do and easy to understand. We probably do these without going through the process at all. If you don't already have them in the workplace, you're going to make them accessible. Job restructuring, again, this is probably something that you do normally and don't even realize. Accommodating someone to do, say, work in the morning from some other location and come in the afternoon on certain days if there's physical therapy or something like that. You probably do a lot of these things already without going through the process, and you just don't even realize that you're doing these kind of things. Modified work schedules. Can someone work from home some of the time? Flat out, can they change their actual, say you're a Tuesday through Friday job, can we change it to Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday? Can we do our 30 hours all in the morning and not in the afternoon so we can accommodate appointments and such like that? These are probably things that are very reasonable. You probably do them already without even going through the process. Providing equipment necessary to perform the job. I have a great piece of equipment in front of me right now that is helping me perform the job. We have chairs, typewriting, keyboards that are easy to work on, all sorts of things that we provide on a daily basis to a lot of people, and again, not even go through the process. This, one thing I wanted to point out, this is very different from affirmative action law. It is based upon the fact that essential functions of the job in the job description are covered and always done. You do not have to create a new job, so to speak. We also, the cost of the accommodation compared to the employer's ability to recover that cost plays a factor, and is based upon whether or not this reasonable accommodation request is considered, and a total number of employees in the entity. Now, again, these are very broad, general, sweeping statements. As long as the person can do the job, what is the cost, and what do you mean the total number of employees in the entity? Again, we have to turn to case law and look at case law and decide whether or not something that someone has requested of us is reasonable to accommodate. Most of the things we've talked about so far we're talking about a few $100s to a few $1,000s to accommodate the person, and those are all considered pretty reasonable, I'm going to guess, to most size companies. There'd just be no question about that. So you're probably thinking, well, what in the world, what if it's a big request? Well, another case law that just closed that actually was a little bit of a shock to everybody who follows this kind of stuff, employers especially. There was a case, and I can't remember what the entity was, but I do remember they had about 300 people, and it was a gentleman, one of their maintenance workers had requested a piece of equipment because of an accommodation, a medical accommodation, so that he could continue to perform his duties. And this piece of equipment cost $70,000. So this is one of the largest cases that has been brought by one individual for one particular piece of equipment to allow them to be able to reasonably accommodate their job. And he was awarded it. The employer was required to buy the $70,000 piece of equipment, and that was the size of an entity of about 300 people. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the courts are considering a reasonable size and a reasonable cost right now currently. That's the largest one I've ever seen. If you're wondering, I've never seen one larger than that right now. So again, we don't have an answer for what cost and what number of people. There's no chart, which would be excellent to have. It's just a case-by-case basis, and then we have to read the case law and understand and apply it the best we can in our workplaces. So if a candidate or a current employee has the ability to do that essential job function that is the job, it is our responsibility to accommodate that person. I should have flipped these two around. How do you know what to do, and how do you know if someone's really even asking for an accommodation? It is, again, our responsibility as employer. It has been shown by case law over and over again that it is up to us to be proactive when an employee, whether verbally, written, or simple, or even in a simple conversation statement, we need to recognize that this is accommodation request. So what I'm saying is, if you need to train your supervisors that if somebody comes up to them over and over, oh, my back hurts, oh, my ankle hurts, oh, this, over and over again, we must be aware and recognize that and start the process. Starting the process, again, when you get to the administration part of our webinar here, is who's going to be in charge of that, who's going to be the contact person, and in our place it is the HR department. So the supervisor would contact us immediately, and we'd start the process of whether or not we're going to accommodate. Temporary accommodation should be considered while you're evaluating a permanent solution. Again, this is an answer we've found through case law that over and over again, the workplaces that are offering temporary accommodations are being more favorably looked at than someone who's saying, no, we're not going to do anything till we figure it out. So that's, you know, to our advantage. I think this might go back to the question that someone was asking a minute ago, what is accommodable, or what is a medical verification of the disability? You can ask for a doctor's verification of the disability. You can also ask the doctor for an opinion on reasonable accommodations. So let me give you an example, because I think it'll help to have an example. I think lately it's very popular to have anxiety and need to bring your dog to work. So I've actually had this quite a few times requested to my office, and in that case, what I say back to everybody is, if this is a true thing, we're going to entertain your accommodation. Of course, we want to make sure that you're able to do the job the best you can. However, there's a process we need to go through to do this. One thing, again, I'm going to repeat is, and we talked about this with FMLA, there's always that doctor in town that will write a note for anything. Well, writing a note for anything isn't a reasonable accommodation at all. First of all, you can request an employee to go to a specific doctor. So if you've got a specific doctor in town and the employee comes with a note, which happened in our workplace, and it said, this was a great one. This was a person whose job title was activity specialist, meaning activity. There were activities involved. And the doctor's note said, this person has a very sore ankle and needs to be off their feet all the time and as much as possible. And I sat the employee down and we started talking through this process. And it's called an interactive process. And we started going through it. And I said, let's look at your job functions and the request that the doctor made, which was off the feet at all times for an activity specialist. That's not reasonable, and for following a properly written job description, and I'll come back to that in a minute because this kind of got us hung up for a little while on this one, that's not going to fly. So how specific or how accommodable do you need to be? You want to make sure you've got some doctors in town. We use 2 specific ones that specialize in workers' comp for us that we also use for ADA and FMLA that we can require someone to go to, and they really understand and write very well what is accommodable, like how much a person can and cannot lift, how much a person can and cannot be at work, if they need breaks, very specifically what kind of breaks they're going to take. That's going to help you guys a lot if you can find some doctors in town that specialize in this and understand, and not just write that note that says, pretty much anything the employee wants, you should let them have, because that would be accommodable. Again, this is a very interactive process for you and for your team member. You want to talk to the employee and create a dialogue. A lot of times when I have people come in and they say they have a ADA request that they'd like to make, and we start talking about it, then they realize that, oh, wow, that's not really a reasonable accommodation, and it's not really what people are talking about when we're talking about being covered by ADA. So just simply listening to the employee and engaging in the process to begin with usually eliminates, I've found, a lot of interesting accommodation requests that I get. However, some are very reasonable and we need to take care of them. So again, make sure you're documenting that process as you go through. You can request specific information to aid in the exploration of options. Again, here's one where you know, substantially limit a life activity. I have sent doctor's notes back and said, doesn't tell me anything. I need to know exactly what job functions are going to be limited and how they're going to be limited by this, so that I can find an accommodation that will work for everybody. So I have sent notes back and forth with doctors many times. Also, evaluate that job description and the essential job duties. If you're going to take away some things today from these webinars, I would say this would be a big one. If you have not updated your job descriptions and your essential job duties lately, you're going to fall into a little trap that just happened to us. And this is, I'm going to refer back to the activity specialist that couldn't walk anymore, needed to be off her feet all the time. I went through our essential job functions on our job description, and unfortunately for us, we had not updated them or even written them properly to begin with. And I am looking at job functions that can all be done sitting at a desk. And I was, even though it wasn't what she did at all, when we had written the original job description, we didn't write what she was doing currently, and everything that had been written could be done at a desk. So we were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. And again, I go back up to number one, create a dialogue with your employee. We talked to this employee, we said, look, we get that this job description is not what you do now, and it's obviously not following exactly what your essential job functions are pretty much in any way, shape, or form. However, this is an activity specialist duty. You know what you do every day. If you cannot do it, let's find something else for you to do. Let's get you into a place that will work better for you. And very fortunately for us, thank goodness, something else came up and was open, and she was so excited to move and go do something else that now we've completely rewritten this job description. It's posted on our webpage right now. It's all updated and it's accurate.
Just one thing to add briefly. As much from a workers' comp aspect as anything, going back to communicating with the doctor and getting information. It's so easy now to communicate what the job functions are by taking a quick video clip and emailing that to the doctor. I know there have been times when I've had questions, the doctor's getting one story from the employee on a workers' compensation claim. Hey, they can't perform this task. And I would email send a quick video clip. Here are the job functions. These are the duties that this person is responsible for doing, and the doctor would take a look at, oh, well, they can do that. That's easy. So don't be afraid to communicate and ask those questions. Sorry, just wanted to throw that in as a sideline.
No, that's wonderful, Jason. You know, and it certainly teaches us a good lesson to go back and make sure that those are really updated. I don't want that to happen again where we are. Also, identifying medical limitations and restrictions tie right into that. Make sure you are talking to the doctor. Make sure you've got some doctors in town that understand and specialize in this. We attach, both with FMLA and with ADA, the actual job description to the piece of paper that goes to the doctor, so the doctor as well can see that. That seems to help us a lot. So you want to determine possible accommodations. There may be one, there may be many, and then evaluate and decide upon which accommodation is going to work for both yourself and the employee. You do, as the employer, if there is more than one accommodation available, it is the employer's choice to choose the most effective and reasonable one presented to them. If more than one is acceptable, we should always give extra consideration to the accommodation that the employee either prefers or had asked for originally. That also helps. Remember, going back to the very first set of slides, we want to this person wants to have their job and they want to be able to do it, and we need to keep that foremost in front in our minds. And if we're going to provide an accommodation and we've got some choices, you know, why wouldn't you give extra consideration to the accommodation that the employee actually requested? I wanted to stop and make sure we maybe covered what the original question was a minute ago. Jason, if you could check in with them as we keep going and just see if I thought maybe we would cover that as we were doing that, and I'm not sure if we did or not.
Okay. I'll check up.
Check up with them. Okay. What we do not have to do, and this again is, people ask me all the time, have you ever said no? I say no all the time. Both the dog requests because of anxiety I said no to at my workplace, and I'm hearing that so many more times now. I have anxiety and need to bring my dog to work. And they call me and I said, well, I told no to the last two people. So here are things we do not have to do at all. We don't have to remove any essential job functions. If they cannot do the job under ADA, they are not covered. This is a little different from FMLA. We don't have to create a new job. In the last case, I happened to have one open, luckily for me, because I really didn't want to fight not having a good job description made. But I wouldn't have had to create a new job. It would have probably been very evident and obvious for me to be able to prove that an activity specialist needs to be able to engage in the actual activities, be a part of the activities, but I wouldn't have had to create a new job. Provide personal need items. I have this question all the time, and I'll give you an example. You guys probably have too. We provide safety goggles at our work, as everybody does and should. And I have people ask me all the time, well, I like better the safety goggles that actually have my eyeglass script in them, which are to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of dollars more than the safety goggles I provide for free. And I very nicely say, I don't need to cover that. If you would like to do that on your own, that is something you can do, but I provide you with safety goggles, and that's what I provide. So just so you guys are aware that that's another opportunity that you can, say no, we can't afford to do that for everybody. And then we don't have to eliminate barriers outside of the work environment. So we don't have to provide transportation to and from work. Now, I would be careful here because I go back to where restructuring a job or modifying work hours, so to speak, or work schedule. You want to be very careful and be very caring about it. I had a person come into my office and say, I keep getting written up for being late. This was at my previous work, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job, and I don't want to lose my job. I love my job. And they had just gone on and on with the manager, their supervisor at this point. The supervisor was frustrated, and the employee was frustrated, and I sat them down, and I started talking to the both of them, and out of the blue, I said, now, explain to me why you're late. And he said, oh, I can't drive, so I take the public transport to work. And I get off at the bus it arrives at 8:05, literally right out the door, and I run into work, and therefore I'm late at 8 o'clock. And I just looked at the supervisor and I said, really? Did you ask? Did you ask the question? Because can't you make his work hours 8:15 to 5:15 instead of 8 to 5? Is that an issue where you are? Do you have other people to open the doors at 8? You know, this was an example where this was a perfectly reasonable accommodation and nobody had talked or asked about it. That's, of course, a little different from eliminating barriers. We weren't providing the transportation, we were just accommodating the fact that the transportation available to this person was going to require us to modify that work schedule a little bit. How are we doing on time?
You know, we are, let's see, at 10:43, so.
Okay, so this is very important. We don't need to spend a heck of a lot of time on it, but there are some extra special accommodations for pregnancy. I just want you guys to be aware that they're out there. I want you to read about them. These cover the basics of it, what people tend to get in trouble for a lot. So come back to this slide and make sure you're just super aware that pregnancy and breastfeeding accommodations are covered by some local and state and special accommodations under the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. So make sure you just check that, and when you're writing your policy at work, you're covering those things. Some of the things, for example, that aren't covered in regular ADA are covered under the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. So forms and websites, again, we talked a lot about FMLA. It's a great website. The ADA website, I go to your right-hand side of that, and you're going to see a place called Featured Topics, and scroll through them because, remember, I told you ADA is vast and there's so much information. You're going to scroll through those featured topics. You're going to go to employment topics. You're going to go through what are reasonable accommodations in the workplace topics. And there's probably like 14 or 15 of those featured topics, and you can breeze through most of them. Workers' comp here in our state, laborcommission.utah.gov, another great site, easy, user-friendly to follow and find great information to help you write your policies. As well, go to our website. I'm perfectly happy to have you guys go on there, beg, borrow, and steal all you want. We have these forms on there, this 13-page packet for FMLA that we talked about last time. I only have 2 forms for ADA. It's a little simpler. You have your initial accommodation request questionnaire. It's got the medical questionnaire attached to it, and then I say attach the person's job description to it, and that is to all go to the doctor to see both what the employee is requesting and 2, what their job functions are. And then the interactive process worksheet is the one where every time I sit down with the employee and we have a conversation about what that request is and where we are with it, that I'm documenting it so that it shows that we're doing everything we can to make sure that this is going to work for everybody. We also have 2 forms on our website for workers' comp. We have our workers' compensation claim form that they need to fill out, and I have a checklist. And the very last line of my checklist for workers' compensation is see if there's some light duty that you can come back and do as quickly as possible, and then I have a whole page of light duty options. And that is all. You can find all of that on our website at tooelecounty.org. So administration, how do you make this work in your workplace? Again, I just thought of everything that somebody might call some sort of leave in their policy book. Look over those policies, double check them. Today's a good day to write down really big, check my job descriptions, check my company policies. Are you tying them into each other, meaning this one right here, clarify your current policies. Can or must you use sick time or vacation time or PTO in concurrence with ADA, workers' comp, or FMLA? The only thing that these rules require when you run anything concurrently is that you must provide the employee with the most beneficial accommodation at the time, meaning if paid leave is most beneficial, that is to be used first in their favor. In workers' comp, if they are able to qualify for some of the disability insurance, that they are to receive that before you make them use their leave. So as long as the employee is getting the best of the options, you can make them also use them all concurrently. When you develop this strong policy, I'd say the next thing that probably kind of gets us every time is making sure our supervisors are trained and understand how it works and what they're supposed to do, and make sure they have an avenue to come to you or whoever it is that's going to be in charge of this administration to have some answers for them. Also, make sure that policy provides your avenue for a complaint. Develop a system so they know that if it's been accepted or if it's been denied, and again, if it's been denied, how they can complain and who they can complain to. Make sure you're being expedient and protect employees against retaliation. So the first thing, if you tell someone they can have their schedule at 8:15 to 5:15, the next person in your office is saying, well, I don't want to have to come in at 8, I want to sleep in. So you need to make sure that you're on top of that, talking with your supervisors, making sure that people understand that there's a reason that some people have a different schedule, etc. Okay, that was quick. Who's got some questions?
All right, folks, you can type your questions into the chat box or the Q&A box. And
I know that's a lot of information really, really quickly, and if you're not as familiar with these policies, you may think of something later, so feel free. Jason, you can tag me and copy me and forward me on it so that I can get some answers if they think of questions later.
Definitely, definitely. A question about your web address again.
Oh, yes, Tooele County, so TOELLECO dot, I think it's org or .gov. I don't type, here, someone type it in for me. Mine's on my favorite bars.
Let me.
On my favorite bar, you go down to Tooele County and push the button.
I will check that.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. It's either .gov or .org. And what you do when you go to that page, our front page, you could go down the left-hand side of the front page. You could go to employment opportunities. If you click on that, that's a direct link to my our personnel page or human management page. Or if you drop down departments and go to human resources, there it is right there. Or you could go to the departments and drop down to human resources. So if you, Jason, if you want to pull up, can you switch it over to yours? And
I can.
Okay.
The website is actually co.tooele.ut.us. Let me.
I wasn't even. I told you it's in my favorites bars. That's like asking me a phone number on my phone. I just push it, right? You pull up the person's picture and push it. Oh, awesome, Jason. Thank you. So again, if you go under on the left, employment, it'll pop you right to our page. Keep going down there. Yep, employment. And that's us. So you've got my email address on there, Tita's email address on there. If you go under, let's see, required notices and employee rights, we have our FMLA packet right there. I have my ADA packet right there. And if you keep going down, 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 you've got your workers' compensation claim and the checklist. So you guys are welcome to open those and look through them and, like I said, beg, borrow, and steal. There's my brand new updated activities specialist job posting that actually is for, you know, describes what an actual activity specialist does now. That was great.
Great.
Can we not see that?
Oh, did you want to open that one up?
Oh, bummer.
Can you not see?
Yeah. Me either. In front of me, it's just us.
I'm trying to open it. So you can't see that. Is it the job description that you wanted or the opening?
I'm not seeing your screen, Jason.
Okay. Let's see what happened. You see it now?
Mm-mm.
Okay, hold on. Let's see what's happening.
There it is.
we go.
Actually, if you go back to the web page, and I just wanted them to see where they could find all those packets. The packets, I think, are very helpful. Even if you just open those packets up and you read through them, then I think you're going to go, oh, I get it. I get what she's talking about. I need to ask about this, clarify this. Like the ADA packet. Not a lot of people maybe have those. So if you open that up, it's like I said, it's just two different forms. In fact, I'm not even sure if my interactive see it, so it's very simple. Who are you? What are you asking for? Do you have some suggestions? Did you use anything at your other work? And I made this from the past by just looking at the ADA website, and I, typed in, are there forms? No, but here's some questions you might want to talk about. Here's the medical verification so that I can get a hold of the doctor, and we talked about that being an interactive process as well. Attaching the job functions and flat out asking the doctor, will you read these job functions? Number C, what job functions may be difficult or restrained due to this disability, just flat out. So.
Okay. All right, let me go back. Everything disappeared now, so I've got to go back and try to see if we've got any questions coming up. Hold on.
All right.
Let me pull up the chat. Let's see, I don't see anything in the chat box. Let me pull up the Q&A real quick.
Nope. Okay, great.
The question, how do we access the forms? And I think you went through that. So,
okay.
So right from the website, and thanks, Brittany, for typing that into the Q&A box, so everybody should be able to see that. There's the website. Thank you, Jamie. That was great. I know we were short on time to cover a voluminous subject there, but thank you for enlightening us. I think that was some great information. I don't see any more questions. Oh,
okay.
Let's see. We did have one other question.
Okay.
How about a special chair for someone with a back injury?
Yeah, actually that is very common. That is one of the more reasonable accommodations that over and over we are seeing. Just make sure it's viable, that the person, again, I find the difference between someone just asking for something because they want it and someone asking for something because it's an actual accommodation is going through the actual formal process and having them fill out the paperwork and go to the doctor. If they're asking for it for fun, they're not going to go to a doctor to say something. If they really need it, they'll be happy on their next visit to the doctor to bring that form.
Sorry, folks, I have lost you.
Uh-oh.
If you can hear me, I apologize. We're seeing what we can do to fix this.
I'm paused.
I can hear.
Can everybody hear at least? Maybe they can't see, but they could hear.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody can hear. It's just
okay.
Jason.
Okay. So yeah, use the formal process. Again, I'll repeat, I find a lot of times people will ask me for something, and then when I say, okay, we're going to go through this formal process, then they go, oh, well, never mind. Or they go through it, and I'm happy to accommodate with, again, keyboards, chairs, all of those are pretty easy accommodations and things we should be pretty readily available for us as employers to accommodate our employees with these days. And not too expensive anymore as well.
You might want to make sure that other members of staff are familiar with that. Request may come to just a supervisor or frontline supervisor whose first impulse may be to say,
no, yep. Exactly. And to tell other employees, why did they get a chair and I didn't get a chair, and to kind of talk them through, those kind of, we call it retaliation in the workplace, but just general questions so that people are aware of what's going on. No, we're good. Just, yeah. Yeah. Jason's back.
Sorry, everything froze on mine. I wrapped I wrapped it up in there already. I was hoping that people could hear. Thank you very much, Jamie, for taking the time. I know this is a tough subject to try to condense down into a reasonable time frame. You've done a great job. We appreciate everybody's attendance here. Good group. If you have questions, definitely you can talk to us, talk to Jamie, and we'll be sending out the slides at the same time that we give you the notice that the webinar recording is posted up to the website, so you can go back and check up on that. Thank you very much once again. Have a safe day out there.
Yep, I think